Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine.
Hello everyone, I'm Troy Moling and thanks for joining us today on Market Journal. Glad you could be here with us this week. We've got a good show in store for you today. And beginning the broadcast, last fall, Iowa's Polk County District Court ruled that officials there could be sued for failing to prevent nitrate contamination of the Raccoon River from agricultural runoff. The district court ruling has been appealed to the Iowa Supreme Court, and the decision could impact ag in other places too. UNL Extension Water and Agricultural Law Specialist Dave Aiken joined me to discuss it and fill us in on what this lawsuit is all about.
Well, this is actually the second time that this issue has kind of come up. The Raccoon River is the source of water for the Des Moines Water Works. And a few years ago, the Des Moines Water Works actually sued drainage districts in Iowa, saying that the water coming out of their drainage districts was contaminated with nitrates and fouled the city's water supply. So that went to court, and the Iowa Supreme Court ruled in 2017 that the drainage districts could not be sued. So this is kind of a follow-up lawsuit to that.
And what are the details on this current lawsuit?
Okay, there's two basically clean water groups, one based in Iowa, one based in Washington, D.C., who have brought this lawsuit, and they're suing a handful of state agency heads in Iowa, saying that they have a so-called public trust responsibility to protect the quality of the Raccoon River for drinking water purposes from ag pollution. And so that's the issue that is in the courts right now.
So go into that a little bit more. What happened there?
Well, basically the idea is that even though the state agencies don't have direct statutory responsibility or administrative funding to keep nitrates out of the river, they have this public trust responsibility to do so anyway. And so they're asking the courts to come in and say, yes, agencies, you have to do this, so reorder your priorities, whatever you have to do, but you have to, one of the things that goes to the top of your list is getting this water cleaned up.
So yeah, break down for us what that means.
Well, there would be, you could spend millions and millions of dollars with buffer strips, regulatory programs to monitor manure application and fertilizer application and this type of thing. And there are only a handful of states that do this at a regulatory level. It's not mandatory under the Federal Clean Water Act, and so it's been a state option, and not many states have gone that route as of yet, and Iowa has not.
And from what I understand, essentially the plaintiffs want the courts to tell these agencies to clean up the Raccoon River, whether the legislature authorizes them to or not. Is that going to happen?
Well, I mean, it seems like a real stretch, but this public trust doctrine goes back well over 100 years in American legal jurisprudence. And in the eastern states, there have been decisions that say states have this kind of responsibility. So it will be very interesting to see what the Iowa Supreme Court says.
Yeah, so when do you think that'll happen?
Well, I would expect a ruling from them probably sometime next summer or next fall. And
then after that?
Well, if they say, yes, the state has this responsibility, then there would be a trial set up either late 2020 or 2021.
So it seems like if this goes to trial, that could have some far-reaching impacts, yes?
Oh, the ag groups and producers will be watching this very closely because, this is one of those things that if it goes against ag, there are going to be copycats all over the place.
Thanks again to Dave. When he has more updates on this lawsuit, we'll be sure and get him back on the show. Moving on to markets now, and on Thursday morning, I was joined by Doug Simon with Tredas. And this week, we talked about some things to keep in mind as we near planting and potential early planting. But a big part of the conversation centered on updates to the coronavirus and its far-reaching impacts, along with how the economy as a whole is responding.
think bigger deal with China, we're wondering is when are they going to start importing corn and soybeans? There were some sorghum sales this week, which was very good. Still wonder about beef and pork imports, there as they replenish their meat supplies. So those are, big impacts, and we'd like to see some more activity on that phase one trade deal here in March. The Secretary of Ag was saying maybe into late spring, but yeah, everybody's keeping an eye out for that, and that gave us some optimism in the markets. After Friday it was pretty gloomy, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday we had some rebound because of the opportunity. We're looking forward to that purchases.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the Federal Reserve stepping in on Tuesday with an emergency interest rate cut in an attempt to shield the economy from effects of a coronavirus outbreak. So any possible repercussions that might be felt in the market as a result of this latest cut? Well,
they announced the cut, the 50 basis point cut, and the market immediately collapsed 700 to 1,000 points, and that's a whole thing about expectations. And they were shadowing that on Thursday, and then Friday we had a reversal, off the lows that we put in on the stock market, but then that longer term it'll be good. I mean, we're not like 2009 where interest rates were higher and oil prices were $150 a barrel. We're in an economy where we've got $45 oil and low interest rates, and they did signal a lower cut, so it's not going to have a huge stimulus, but it's going to give some companies advantage. I mean, I had farmers, I was out in the country on Tuesday and Wednesday, people are, hey, can we, or people talking about housing too, and different things where we can refinance, or maybe we can have lower operating notes, and all that stuff's definitely going to help longer term. It's not going to change people's opinion about, hey, am I going to go to Walt Disney World, but it's going to change their big picture. It'll help the economy in that regard.
Anything in particular you'd advise us to buy or sell right now?
That's a really good question. People are looking at gold and other commodities. Are we going to, if the stock market is falling, are people going to rotate out of the equities and go into the stock market? I mean, there's fear on everything right now, but people are buying some gold basically 20 days ago, 30 days ago. We've had a pretty good run up on that side of it. I better stay away from specific recommendations.
Okay, that's fair enough. Be diplomatic about it. Any particular sector of the market that's going to take longer to recover when we have outbreaks like this?
The travel industry and places where people are going into large areas. I think, interestingly enough, I just kind of think about it. Perhaps ethanol actually might do a little better if we have people going in their cars and driving to see family or going regional areas. So we could see perhaps, obviously, crude oil. From jet fuel, and that time is, suffering, but perhaps maybe ethanol margins have struggled, since harvest, and so that's a big issue. But maybe we'll see some ethanol demand from that. Hopefully, maybe we'll get some exports going on that side of it.
Kind of along that same line, what about petroleum? Would now be a good time to lock in some of those input costs?
I know we were looking a couple weeks ago at nat gas and looking at, people talking about, fuel for the summer, and the seasonals are positive on both of those going forward, and so we have fallen off from where we were a week ago. So if it was a good buy then, I think it's a good buy here to be locking in. I don't know if we can really go down much more from here. They're talking about cutting some of the production out of the Middle East and Russia to I think their earnings start to suffer when we get down here at this level. So I think they want to see a cutback in the supplies and try to boost prices.
Let's look at planting a second, and particularly early planting. What have you seen here, and how's that going to impact things?
Well, down in the south, it's been pretty wet. That's the one area that's really, really wet, and so they're going to be slow down there. But up here, I mean, we're supposed to be, 70 coming up this weekend, and we were really warm and pretty windy. So actually with the wind, there's fire alerts and that thing going on. So we dried out on the top quite a bit. So I think there's a lot of people doing some field work here when I was out in the country the last several days, and I think the way the March forecast looks, I mean, we should be in pretty good shape maybe to get planning on more normal schedule than we did last year.
Okay, and finally, so some little pre-planting advice for us, if you could. So any marketing or risk management tips that you'd like to share with us that we can take home?
You bet. Our February prices were established here last month. The average, we were $3.88 on corn and $9.17 on the beans, and so you're looking forward. Usually, we like to look at pricing corn in the springtime, in between February and June. Talked about that before on the show, but one of the things now at $3.88, the prices aren't too attractive. I mean, we're below that right now on corn. Hopefully we'll get back above that. But some work from Ag Resource last week had show that you should be around 105% of that 388 price. They've shown that we've been able to go back above that at some point into the spring. Over the last 18 years. Only in 2013 we didn't go above that, but we had been in the $850 corn in 2012, and so we were kind of in a bearish market going down. But it gives you some hope that if we can get back up above 4 to 405, that's about 105% of that. A lot of times you can get up to about 110% of that springtime price, which puts you up into the 420s. But right now prices are pretty negative. But if we can get back up above those levels, we better have our selling shoes on and be ready to get some things done and look at that, in conjunction to the PLC price, ARC price, and your crop insurance, and then look at your pre-harvest sales and put together. And that's what we do at Tredas, is help people put those things together. And how do you do it in I think, organized manner, and so we're not kind of whipped around by all the volatility we've had this last 2 weeks and the negativity. And so how do we actually deal with that and do it on a professional manner? The other thing going on right now too, it's interesting, is we always talk about futures basis carry, but this last week actually the carry between the March and the May and March and the May and the board actually went positive on the March over the May, and the basis levels have been 10 over the March to 5 over the May now at Columbus. The basis levels were still strong. Those things are indicative of a positive market. The futures prices aren't very good right now, but the internal structure of the market telling them that, hey, we still need corn in this market. How are we going to supply it? How are we going to get it out of the farmers' hands and get it into the commercials? That's all encouraging. Usually is foreshadowing a little bit more positive prices, even though the world is pretty negative right now.
Thanks to Doug for being here. Next week, we'll be joined by Scott Brown from the University of Missouri. So if you have a question you'd like for me to ask him, email us or get in touch on social media, and I'll pass that question along. Time now for this week's trivia question, and it's about dairy. We love our Nebraska dairy producers. Here's the question. How many pounds of milk does it take to make 1 pound of cheese? Is the answer 5, 10, 15, or is it 20? Make your selection, and I'll have the answer after Al's forecast. Next up, like many farm families, Angela and Carrie Newth have expanded and diversified out of necessity. And in many cases, this has meant evaluating how they use their assets and where they spend their dollars. And this diversification is dynamic. With their 2 sons, Gregory and Garrison, both active on the farm, they also have a diversity of perspectives. Everyone has their own specialty, and everyone brings different insights to the table. Read about the Newths and how they decide to adopt different practices and how they navigate family dynamics in the March Nebraska Farmer. Time now for weather with Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Al Dutcher. Al, it seems like the coldest weather is behind us for the season. What do you say we celebrate with a good forecast? What have you got for us today?
Well, Troy, you're exactly right. We have gotten to the point of the year where we shouldn't expect a lot of long-lived Arctic events, and very few of them probably are going to come down the pipeline as we get more spring weather into the region. And we've been seeing that off and on now for the past 5 weekends. We're going to see warm temperatures again this weekend. Definitely a different pattern than we've seen last year, where we were buried in snow up to this point, and we're still getting close to when the bomb cyclone hit us and caused all the extensive flooding. So we'll take the kind of conditions we've had. The drier weather is concerning in terms of fire danger. We've had several red flag events this week already. And of course, with this dry weather and these high winds, it's not going to take much to get things out of control. So be very, very careful when you're outside working with any open flames. These windy and dry conditions could really get out of hand in a short order and cause significant damage. Bottom line is that we are looking at a trough in the western United States that may actually bring some moisture into the region as we get late in the weekend to help reduce that fire danger. But for the time being, we're going to be dealing with very warm temperatures with the southwest flow in the upper atmosphere, surface lows over the northern Rockies. There's just nothing to pump moisture into our region for today. So we're going to be high and dry with the main primary precipitation shield up in the northwestern part of the United States. Now, as we go into tomorrow, we'll see that trough separating somewhat from the northern flow and digging out into the southwest. And it'll sit a series of low pressure systems at the surface. The first one in western Kansas will start to move out Sunday night and start to move toward Illinois, with another one following right behind it. So we'll start to see precipitation breaking out as we get into the southwest, and that will start to expand rapidly on Monday as this secondary low over southeastern Colorado starts to merge with this low to the east of us and bringing up that Gulf moisture in our region, developing thunderstorm activity and moderate rainfall across portions of east central, southeast, and south central Nebraska. And then that will move rapidly to the east as we get into Tuesday. That low pressure starts to try to push its way onshore. Another piece of energy will eject out of that upper air low over the southeastern portion of Colorado, which may allow to have, with the northern stream, allow some moisture to develop across northern Nebraska. Then we start to see a clear separation between the northern and the southern stream. The southern stream looks like it's going to head more eastward, the northern stream more eastward, and we're caught in between. So low pressure develops over the Texas Panhandle, bringing that moisture toward the north, but basically halts it basically across the southern half of the southern plains and doesn't really make it to Nebraska. We get the cold frontal passage during the middle of the week on Thursday, and that will bring in cooler air, and that will push off the main precipitation shield into the southeast as low pressure along the surface will really pump that moisture up, and we'll see a very heavy band of moisture from essentially eastern Kansas all the way through southern Illinois. On Friday, we get more of a zonal flow, some downsloping winds, and we should start to see a fairly decent warm-up going into next week. And as a primary low pressure system will remain to our north, and that's where the heaviest precipitation will remain, basically the Canadian border northward, with heavy precipitation in the southeast. Now, as we go farther into the future, from next Thursday through the following Tuesday, high pressure once again, it looks like it's going to build in for next weekend with very warm conditions in terms of precipitation. Although we are showing an elevated chance for above normal precipitation, the primary influence will be back into the desert southwest.
Thanks, Al. Back to trivia now, and this week we asked, how many pounds of milk does it take to make 1 pound of cheese? If you said B, 10 pounds, then hey, you got it right. Why don't you head to the fridge and pour yourself a glass? Next up, like many in the ag industry, 2019 wasn't without a shortage of challenges, and that includes the ethanol industry. However, in many cases, challenges create opportunity, and that's the mentality heading into 2020 among many ethanol leaders. Market Journal's Bill Dodd recently caught up with Nebraska Ethanol Board Administrator Roger Berry to see how the ethanol industry is looking to focus forward as we continue moving through 2020. Bill, with 2019 firmly in the rearview mirror, what is coming down the road for ethanol in the months ahead?
Thanks, Troy. You know, the road ahead for the ethanol industry may still have a few speed bumps in store for producers. However, toward the end of 2019, the industry made its way around several roadblocks, such as an overreach in small refinery exemptions granted to oil refineries by the EPA, and a plethora of trade barriers resulting from President Trump's trade war with China. Now, despite these problems and others, many leaders in the ethanol community came away from a challenging year with a surprisingly optimistic outlook for 2020.
Despite a rough year in 2019, things are still rolling right along in many Nebraska ethanol plants. Last year, a seemingly unjustifiable number of small refinery waivers crippled RFS demand and contributed to more than 20 ethanol plants being temporarily or permanently shut down. But all hope was not lost. As 2019 began to wind down, the ethanol industry got a big win when a 10th Circuit Appellate Court ruled a handful of small refinery exemptions were not properly awarded by the EPA.
Was it enough of a push? I think so, because it really has EPA now evaluating what they've been doing with the SREs during 2019 and, well, I should say during 2016 to 2018. I mean, now we've got, I think I saw this morning, 23 that have applied for small refinery exemptions in 2019, and those haven't been decided on yet. But I think with this 10th Circuit Court ruling that has come out, it's going to cause EPA to really evaluate as they look at these 2019 small refinery exemptions. Are we doing this correctly or aren't we? And we all know in the industry they are not doing it correctly. And so we think that this 10th Circuit Court decision is just huge to the ethanol industry.
In order to keep that momentum moving forward, many ethanol industry leaders, including Roger, are preparing for a Washington fly-in. During this April event, several RFA member companies will deliver the ethanol industry's message to key lawmakers on Capitol Hill.
And the thing that I really enjoy about this is we're not just going into offices of our own congressional staff, our congressional staff here in Nebraska. We're going into offices of those who actually oppose ethanol. And that is just a lot of fun to go in and visit with people that are opposed to it and sit down and have true, honest discussions as to why we feel ethanol is good and why they feel that they don't want ethanol in their districts. And if you want to do something fun, just do that. Go into a congressional office and sit down with a senator or a congressperson and talk ethanol with them. Just a lot of fun. And that's what I really appreciate about the ACE fly-in.
While the 2019 trade war did give its fair share of headaches to ag and ethanol producers alike, Roger sees Phase 1 of the trade deal as a good start to a new beginning of trading ethanol overseas.
We're going to see China take off and start importing ethanol again. They were one of our biggest customers prior to the trade wars. And we want to get it back there and expand even further than what we are. And the potential is really there. They no longer have I guess it was a mandate to go to E10 nationwide in China. They no longer have that in their sites, but you still have provinces that want to go to E10 within China. And I think eventually they'll get back to their E10 mandate, especially once the provinces start proving how it cleans up the air by using even just 10% ethanol.
Another silver lining for 2020 was the announcement of year-round E15 sales in the United States, as well as the introduction of the Higher Blends Incentive Program. While there are some finer details to be worked out before the program is formalized, Roger tells me this would be an extraordinary step in bringing many petroleum distributors up to date on fuel blending infrastructure for their stations.
They call it HBIP. HBIIP is the acronym for it. You know, any government program, we have to have that acronym in there. Got to have that. But it's going to be just, from what we're understanding, a lot along the lines of what the original BIP program was in 2015. We don't know the exact details yet. The USDA opened it up for comments here about a month and a half, 2 months ago. And of course, we did submit comments of what we would like to see in that program. But the main thing that we really want to see is to make sure that it's open and available to all retailers, whether that be a retailer with one station or that be a retailer with 100 stations or more, whatever the situation may be. We want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to take part in that program so that they can put in the infrastructure that they need in order to expand the offerings to the consumers of higher blends of ethanol, because it gets us to where we want to be with autos, that we've been working with them for years on these high compression, low carbon engine drivetrains that use around that E30 blend of fuel and takes advantage of the octane, and that's what ethanol is octane, takes advantage of that octane to increase the efficiency of that vehicle and decrease the greenhouse gases coming out to where we have a car that is real close, when you look at the entire greenhouse life cycle, is real close to a battery car. And in some situations, some studies are finding that we actually become a carbon sink. So do you kind of see why I'm so excited about ethanol, why I'm really pumped, not to use a word there, but why I'm really happy about what's going on in the ethanol world, and people are starting to see this. It's just amazing. E15 sales are up, way up. Past summer, they were way up. They continue to increase. We continue to see retailers wanting to put E15 in. Hold on and put your seatbelt on, because we've got some great days coming for ethanol and agriculture here in the state of Nebraska.
So Troy, it seems like good news for 2020. If things are going as well for ethanol this year, as is hoped by many in the industry, we should start to see some of that positive energy transfer into the agricultural sector as well. Now, this forward progress is something we will definitely be keeping a close eye on as the year shapes up for the ethanol industry. But that's what I've got my eye on this week. For now, I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Bill. Finally today, good news for hemp producers in Nebraska. The USDA has recently announced 2 programs that are designed to protect hemp crops from natural disasters. First, the multi-peril crop insurance pilot program will only be available in certain counties of 21 states, of which Nebraska is not included. The other program is the Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance Program, or NAP. This program provides coverage against loss for hemp grown for fiber, grain, seed, or CBD for the 2020 crop year, where no permanent federal crop insurance program is available. However, if you are interested in this program, there are a few requirements you should know about.
There are 4 kind of basic things that producers need to be aware of if they're interested in producing hemp and interested in the NAP program. And the first thing is that under the 2018 Farm Bill, they will need a license to produce hemp in the state of Nebraska. The entity that they need to visit with in order to get that license is the Nebraska Department of Agriculture through the state of Nebraska. They have their plan approved at the federal level, and so they are issuing licenses for hemp production for those that meet the requirements. So that's the first thing that a producer is going to need even before they come see us for NAP coverage. The second thing they need to be aware of if they're going to receive NAP coverage through us is that they will have to have a contract with someone to purchase whatever it is they're going to produce as a hemp product. So whether it's hemp for grain or seed or CBD or fiber, they will have to have some sort of purchase contract in place as part of that NAP application process. The third thing that I wanted producers to keep in mind is there is a service fee associated with NAP. It's $325 per crop per county. So just to be aware that that's associated with their NAP application. And the last thing that I wanted to point out is that they will also be required to report their acreage for production purposes. So they'll need to go to their county Farm Service Agency office to report those acres. And that's a requirement whether they're going to receive a NAP NAP application or not. They are going to have to report those acres to their county farm service agency, and that's part of the requirements of their licensing for hemp production in the state.
NAP Basic 50/55 coverage is available at 55% of the average market price for crop losses that exceed 50% of expected production. Buy-up coverage is available in some cases. The 2018 Farm Bill allows for buy-up levels of NAP coverage from 50 to 65% of expected production in 5% increments at 100% of the average market price. The deadline to apply for this program is fast approaching. Applications are due by March 16th, so if you want to apply for this program, now is the time to get all your ducks in a row. For more information on USDA risk management programs for hemp producers, you can visit farmers.gov/hemp. We've got the information on the Market Journal website as well. That's going to do it for this week's show. Remember, if you missed a story, be sure to download the Market Journal mobile app or follow us on social media to join in on the conversation. Next week, Nebraska Extension has been pretty busy the last couple weeks. We'll give you a behind-the-scenes look at two of their biggest events that help in getting producers ready for the season ahead. Hope to see you right back here next time. I'm Troy Moling. Thanks for watching.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.